There are creatures science refuses to recognize. If our eyes see it, if our cameras capture it, does it exist? Do you believe? Do you, Chris? Do you believe in the Yeti?
Do you believe in a thing called... Oh, that's what you were going to ask me. Do I just listen to the rhythm of my heart? Do I believe in a thing called love? I believe in the Yeti. I do believe in the Yeti. And I do believe that I am one of the hosts of this show, the Scary Stories We Tell podcast. But we're talking Lost Tapes Chronicles. I am one of your hosts, Chris Dashium. I am joined once again. At some point I will have to stop saying once again, and it'll no longer be that. Yeah. And so we're again, like it's not in right now. We're getting there.
We're getting there. I give it a month.
Yeah, Jess.
I'm here again. For the show.
Yeah.
Again.
One more time. Sing it out loud. Yeah,
How many more episodes are left in this season?
4. Oh, there are 4. Yeah, there are 4 more episodes of Lost Tapes. They one of the big 3. I
think so.
I guess so. Is okay? You know, Maggie and I. You know, your doppelganger. I would say you're the phantom kangaroo of Jess.
My stunt double.
Yeah. Who? If you were Sabrina, are you Maggie's familiar or the other way around?
I think it's probably the other way around. I definitely need a familiar to tell me I'm doing stupid shit.
That's fair, but I guess so. Let's
Maggie is my sailor.
so let's look at it. So let's start with 3, and if we need 4 or 5, let's go for it. So Bigfoot. We're talking top 5.
Top 5 cryptids of anyone that, like, if I said what's a mythological,
what are the ones that are going to come up? Okay, let's start with 3. Let's start with 3, and if we need more, we'll go there. So Bigfoot, Loch Ness,
Chupacabra.
Okay, so we don't stop there because that wouldn't have been my answer. My answer would have been Mothman. So 4 is Mothman.
Okay.
So 5. Can we stop at 5?
We stop it. What would be?
So Bigfoot, Loch Ness.
I feel like aliens are also a winning.
I don't consider aliens cryptids. Aliens are their own thing. Yeah. Is it Bigfoot, Loch Ness, Chupacabra, Mothman, and Yeti?
Yeah.
I think of the 5, I think Yeti is in the top 5. I mean, those are going to be the ones that people have heard of.
The abominable snowman.
Right. And I think at this point, like, if you had asked me maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, like, what are there, you could have gotten away with maybe 3, but now Chupacabra and Mothman, I think, are pretty mainstream in a way that they weren't 10, 15 years ago.
I would agree. Yeah, Mothman especially.
Right. And I mean, I don't want to say we know who to blame, but I think we know who to blame.
Our good friend Rich Adam.
Yeah, I think it is 100% Richard's fault, but at the same time, John Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies, was popular when it came out. So it's not like it's the reason it's adapted, and the reason Richard adapted it is because it's an important book in the world of parapsychology. Right. But yeah, I genuinely think that now we're talking top 5, and I think Yeti is up there. I think Yeti is, so. And I think even honestly, Yeti is probably Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, and Yeti. Like, I think you could make the case for just those 3. And what's funny is Yeti and Bigfoot are the same thing, essentially, in a lot of ways. I don't want to say they are, because I don't want to offend anybody, but they're kind of the same thing.
I view them as being in the same species.
Right. Like, complementary ideas.
One is just, can live in the extreme cold temperatures versus one lives in a more temperate climate. Like
the Pacific Northwest.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
And I think, like, there's been, especially because, the things that put these into people's minds are movies and television. And I think that there's been a lot of movies and television episodes that have covered things like the Yeti, like, a giant snow creature. I mean, they're in Skyrim, right? Like,
well, I mean, again, like,
effectively what it is a Yeti.
Yeah. I mean, again, like, we're at the point now where, like, Yeti or Abominable Snowman was in a Pixar movie in Monsters Inc. So it's like when you've hit that kind of,
when Disney knows who you are, you somebody.
Yeah. Well, and if they put you, I mean, also if you're a fan of Disneyland and Disneyland lore, Matterhorn at Disneyland, one of the original rides, has an Abominable Snowman, and then Expedition Everest at Animal Kingdom has the Disco Yeti, called the Disco Yeti because it's a giant. So it's on Expedition Everest. It's one of the greatest rides, and it is a ride where the queue of the ride is taking you through like a Everest like tour like company, and you get on the ride and you go up this mountain. You get to the top, and the ride like stops at the fucked up tracks, and you go backwards and you see a giant goddamn Yeti animatronic. And I'm talking like the animatronic is 25 feet tall. Jeez. And it's so big that they didn't do the supports correctly on the ride. So it's actually on the supports of the ride. And if it was on doing its kind of, gyrations, it would hurt the structural integrity of the ride. So they realized that pretty early on. So they turned the animatronics off. But what they did to simulate it moving is essentially strobe lights. And so in the community of Disney park people, he is called the Disco Yeti because of the flashing lights. And you know what? I've been on the ride, and I will tell you, a 25-foot animatronic Yeti is fucking terrifying, moving or not. Moving or not. And they've talked about in recent years, they've said, "Oh, we're gonna fix it. We're gonna make the Yeti move again." Hashtag make the Yeti move again. But I don't know about you. I'm prattling on about the Yeti, but I kind of love it.
I mean, I like the Yeti. I think that, any aspect of being on Everest or any kind of mountainous terrain and then add a giant snow creature into it. Yeah. I mean,
right. Like no fucking brainer, really.
But this episode, though, operates more like the crate from Creepshow.
Well, you know what they say, if you can't go to Everest,
bring Everest to me. Yeah. Well, they don't even, where is this episode? So I guess we should just say what our vehicle is for a framing device here this time, which is scientist,
journalist. So it's the most like
so
generic.
It's not even scientist, not even people who would make sense going to
like
this.
It's like the most idiotic interpretation of journalist possible. They're journalists who don't want to get scooped, so they want to be. They want to get the scoop. They want to get the first scoop, and so they're like, let's get on board. So the framing device of this episode is a billionaire goes to Everest, he dies.
Right.
Or excuse me, a billionaire goes to Everest, he goes missing. A couple years later, his body comes back with a major discovery. That's what it says. And so these two journalists are like, let us get onto the boat. Nobody knows what it is. We want to figure out what the major discovery is. All of us know what the major discovery is. It's fucking Bigfoot, the Yeti, the ice Bigfoot, snow Bigfoot.
Iceman.
I will tell you this much. I think the framing device for this episode works pretty well.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yes. So I think the framing device of this episode works rather well. It's kind of generic-y, but it works rather
generic.
Well.
It at least is more, there's at least more of a story happening within it than in the previous episode where it's literally just, we went to go raid a moonshine, some moonshiners, and we found this monster. This at least has some purpose to it. The characters, as shitty and awful as they are, because they're irritating as shit, at least have a motive. It makes sense. Now, it would make more sense if they were like scientists because they heard about this discovery and didn't want to be scooped, as it were.
Right.
Because they want to make the discovery.
Or they're the scientists that are being brought on board the ship to verify whatever it is.
Right, exactly. Like, hey, we discovered this weird new animal. Like in one of the segments that the woman is like, well, why would they... What's the big deal about a discovery of a new animal? I'm like, what do you mean? What's the big deal of a discovery of a new, like that it would be a major deal.
It's not really though.
Yeah. Regardless of its Yeti, though.
There are plenty of new species that are found every year, but I think the bigger issue is if this guy goes where he went and he finds a major discovery, are we being led to believe everybody in this universe is so fucking stupid they couldn't just infer what the fuck this thing was that he found? I think that's the bigger problem.
Well, and then it already, like the second this discovery was made, the military or whoever would be called in and that thing would be carted by a helicopter immediately out of the area. It would not just have been sitting around for a while, because what they discover is once they get, and this is where the crate from Creepshow comes. Once these journalists get to the place that this box is being stored in, it says biological specimen, like in big letters, like anybody would have those stamps in. And
that's how you know.
And then they go around the crate and you're like, oh my God, the crate is busted out from the inside.
What a surprise.
But then we get some of my actual, more favorite gory moments. in this episode.
There is a guy who gets his arm ripped off, and not only do you see the ripped off, you see the ripped off arm, and then you see the guy's body without the arm.
Yeah, it's actually pretty decent.
Yeah,
like,
I was shocked.
Kind of came through with this episode in that capacity, not too obscured.
I was kind of surprised, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, like if they didn't go for it with like Devil Monkey, but
no, I don't even know. I'm not even sure if they tried to either. The Devil Monkey episode
was very much like the Ghost episode or the Poltergeist episode, where it was just like, and then they died.
Right. Talking about and then they died. This episode is hilarious.
Yeah, it is. That's what I will give this episode. This episode I did find genuinely like bad episode.
But the way this episode ended is hilarious. Oh my God. So let me paint you a picture. So Yeti loose in the ship. Okay. These two journalists are running around. The guy that got them into the ship gets murdered. They're trying to get off the ship. There are multiple doors to get off the ship. The security guard for the ship just happens to be there when they're knocking on the locked door to get out. Security guard, instead of shooting with his gun, like a security guard should have, instead of shooting the lock,
especially on a ship in where a new biological specimen that is the Yeti is being stored.
Right. So instead of shooting it, and I guess maybe the way you could interpret it is he didn't want to let it out, but I would contend this thing is big enough that it probably could bust through the door if it really wanted to.
I mean, the way the crate that it shows that it was in is a massive shipping crate.
That's my point.
A sturdy, solid wood. So yeah, if it busted out of that, it probably could bust through a metal door on a ship.
Right. So instead of helping these two people who have, again, they've not really done anything wrong. They busted into this ship, so breaking and entering. They went and looked at this thing, but ostensibly the creature was already out, already running around. They didn't do anything.
Right.
This guy lets them die.
Yeah, he sure does.
He just goes, all right, I'm out of here. And these two
that's
people,
a weird sound. I won't go check on that.
These two people just like turn around, and the camera is pointed at the Yeti, and the Yeti fucking brutalizes them.
Yeah.
Like probably smashes them into hamburger meat. Like this Yeti, this Yeti is violent. Holy shit.
I would be too if I got captured and stuck in a box for how long? How long was it sitting there?
3 years.
3 years. So they made a new discovery and let it sit on a ship for 3.
Yeah. Like, what the fuck?
With one security guard who's like, I am not letting you miss out by any means, even if there are other people in there.
Yeah. Oh my God. I genuinely don't understand. Like, the way this episode ended is hilarious. Like, I've never seen an episode end this way, where it's just like, yeah, fuck you. Like,
I'm not helping you.
And
I'm not dying.
I can't tell if it's like, I'm not helping you because I don't want to die, or I'm not helping you because like I'm just so scared, or like what it is, but like any way you cut it, it's funny.
An evil innkeeper who's like, I've fed my Yeti and now it won't bother him for 3 more years.
Yeah, well, but then, the way the episode ends is equally as strange.
Yeah, they just kind of give up.
So they die and they get murdered, and then their deaths are attributed as drowning. And then the body is sent, the dude's body and the Yeti are sent to Plum Island.
Yeah.
Which is Montauk. That's where the Montauk project thing takes place.
Right.
Right? The Montauk Monster, that's Plum Island. That's where they're like supposedly experimenting on animals and like, working on infectious diseases and stuff. That's all taking place at Montauk, which is Plum Island, which is where they were trying to send me, Clary, and fucking Silence of the Lambs.
Yep.
Yeah, that's where they make the deal.
Hannibal Lecter and the Yeti.
Yeah. Yeah, Hannibal Lecter. Yeah, exactly. But so that ends up...
Probably other things.
Yeah, but so that ends up being the way this episode ends. I think this episode was okay.
It's not bad. I mean, compared to the last 2, 3 that we've watched, this at least was a coherent story. It helps that it's a cryptid that, like, is a common one. So I think my issue with episodes like Devil Monkey and the more, like, obscure cryptids and things like that are that there's just not enough lore already known to kind of fill in spots and to make it work in your brain. Whereas like with Yeti, we know where they are, and we're just there to see Yeti fuck some shit up, and that's fine. Well, but that's because I know about Yeti and all of that, but I don't know about these other things that you're spouting off as like, yeah, it's like more information than that. Though.
Well, and I 100% agree with you. But the other kind of thing that I always talk about, and Maggie and I always talk about whenever Maggie is on, is the idea that if these things don't have enough,
right,
like pre-existing stuff, that allows you to do whatever you want. But they don't even
creative freedom.
Right. But then they don't even rise to that occasion either. So it's just, it's, I don't know. It's all kind of strange and weird. And again, I'm a fan of how well this episode is done, because I think this might be the most well done big name cryptid that they've done, because for the most part, the big name ones, they haven't really stuck the land for whatever reason. I mean, yeah, like the Yeti, I'm actually kind of surprised in a lot of ways that it took to the third season of the show to do Yeti. I mean, maybe they were like, we need to save some.
But we have to have one big one every type
or a
thing.
couple, maybe.
A couple big ones.
I mean, this is the first big one this season. Like,
true.
The rest of the season is, I mean, I don't know. This is the first one this season that I've even felt like is a cryptid.
Right.
Like, I guess Kraken, but the Kraken is like a mythological thing.
It's a mythological creature.
And it's also just a giant squid. Like,
it's just a giant squid that people elaborated on storytelling.
A Kraken is technically a giant octopus, but like a giant squid exists, so it doesn't matter either way. Like, you know what I mean?
A very large multi-tentacled thing.
Right, like that's my point. Like, it doesn't matter either way because that exists. So it's already scary because it does exist. So, right. But yeah, this is the first time this season I've even felt like, oh, this is a cryptid, like a genuine cryptid. So, right. And that's not great either for a show that was up until this point really about embracing the cryptid kind of like lore and like really like kind of presenting cryptids in not like a serious way, but presenting them in a way where they were like just very matter of fact. Like, here's cryptid. Yeah. Here's the cryptid we're showing you in the episode. And here is the fictionalized version, and here's some information about the cryptid itself, and then some, like, if it's not real, some like things that maybe it is inspired by, or whatever. And it's like, that was great. And now we've gotten to the point with the show where there are few and far between those things anymore anyway. Right. Like, they don't even have that stuff. Like, they've foregone like info edutainment.
Right. Exactly. And that's something that I definitely miss from like the first seasons of it actually feeling like an Animal Planet show.
Right.
That like when they used to do the late night, like the animals that live at night type shows where they're always kind of presented a little scarier than like the other shows were.
Yeah.
And that's what those first, season and a half kind of felt like. And now this episode specifically felt more like that than the last ones, because it felt like they were leaning too hard into trying to make like the focus the people that were investigating the cryptid versus it focusing on the people who were impacted by the cryptid,
i.e. the fucking Enigma Corporation.
Yes.
Anytime the framing
or the FBI or whoever,
or these two photojournalists.
Yeah, I'd rather see like journalists or scientists or something doing it, because that also, I don't like the and it is a product of the time period it's in, but everything has like the Call of Duty type feel, right?
Right.
Like, where you're following them around with their guns.
Well, yeah, that was the whole thing in the zombie episode. It was like Doom.
Yeah. And it's like, I want to hear, it's an Animal Planet show. I want to hear from scientists and, zoologists, cryptozoologists. Why are there not cryptozoologists on this? We've got some guy from the fucking Inquirer talking about things.
I mean, Lauren
cryptozoologist.
Lauren Coleman shows up, but it's like I guess he would probably consider himself a cryptozoologist. I consider him one, but I think they bill him as an author. So maybe that the show is like even less. The show is even less interested in. I think the show is even less interested presenting like the people as cryptozoologists anymore. And I think they're wanting it to be less about the cryptids and more about just like weird things.
Weird stuff that happens, like
zombies and vampires. Like, again, like if this show had stayed on for another season, where the hell does this show go? Because where it's going now is so.
It would have to go. I think, like I mentioned a couple episodes before, that they would have to lean more into the international cryptid world,
right?
Which they do. Some episodes are like that, where they go to a different country or whatever. But most of these episodes are very, USA based. Even the cryptids that like start off somewhere else and then somehow end up in the United States. Like, we're still talking about the States. So I think they'd have to lean harder into the international stuff, which could be cool it could be really cool, but they don't have the budget for what they're trying to do presently. So I can't imagine there was any budget, something a bit more, bigger in scope globally.
Right.
Well, I think like at this point, we're like one step away from talking about like, the man who murdered all those teenagers in Haddonfield.
Well, and that's the thing is like where the show is now is it's not a far step from that. Like realistically, it's not like it's not it's they have had zombies and vampires now. Like those werewolves. And werewolves like mummies. Those are that's the one they haven't done yet. But like if they could have done that, they probably would have done that. So they didn't. But I bet if the show had gone on another season, they might. And the thing that bums me out about all this is like at the core of it, you have absolutely like one of my favorite cryptids, the Yeti, who's actually like, again, like, yeah, we talked about how he's snow Bigfoot, and he is, but the Yeti has been part of the people of the region's lives forever. They've always worshipped some sort of being in the snow
that lives in the mountains,
right? A glacial being, I think, is what they called it at one point. But like they always
we
believe.
Don't go into any of that.
No, they didn't.
In this episode.
No, and this is a perfect opportunity to introduce like the wild man, and like because that's also the way the Yeti is described as kind of like a wild man. And
do they have a missing link episode?
No, again, like I don't know what they were thinking at this point in the show's run, because they have gone so far away from even a framing device that suits a cryptid of this caliber. This episode should have taken place on Everest.
Yeah. Like they should have been like, look, like it should have taken place. The story should be the body of it should be the story of the guy on Everest.
Oh, he should be the one who had the camera.
Found.
Oh,
he should have had the camera, and then they found the camera when they found his body and the Yeti, which I guess they somehow subdued and put in a box.
Well, what if the lost tape ends with him like knocking the Yeti out, like tranquilizing the Yeti, but the Yeti kills him in the process.
Right.
Right. And then they find him.
And the journalists could be the ones that are watching through the tape.
Right. And we don't even follow that. Like,
right.
Yeah.
We're following this story like that.
I think it would be a better episode.
Yeah. And hey, budget would probably not work for having something on Everest. But
well, no, but like you could go film in fucking California, in the mountains in California,
like ski resort. I mean, you're getting like found footage stuff. It's up close. It's not.
And the Yeti
it's whatever.
The Yeti doesn't always have to have snow.
It could be the ski-free Yeti.
Yeah, well, again, the Yeti doesn't always have to have snow.
No,
Everest isn't always snowy.
If we were going with this guy who was going on his trek through Everest, we get some cool near close moments of being on the mountain.
Oh, it's a bear. Is it a Yeti? Is it a bear? Yeah.
And then we get that build up, and then Yeti kills him while he simultaneously tranks him. But yeah. That would be an exciting episode. There's nothing exciting about any of these episodes because it's all very, like we talked about before, paranormal investigative type stuff. Very, post Blair Witch found footagey movie stuff where it's all we're using security cameras now, so our shots can be static, and we're using,
and it looking bad is factored into it.
You're right, exactly. But it feels overly manufactured, whereas if somebody just has their shitty camcorder climbing a mountain, plus it gives it more suspense and more tension of not being able to clearly see things rather than purposely obscuring things because your fucking effects.
Well, yeah, and I think that for me is the ultimate reality of the episode. Using the static camera stuff is just to cover up that it looks bad.
Yeah. Use those weird angles,
and it does cover up that it looks bad. I'll tell you that much. It does. It makes me know that it looks bad.
Behind the Yeti view, though, it looks like a Spirit Halloween costume.
Well, that's the thing. Anytime you see any of these things up close, I mean, even in the Devil Monkey episode, it was the same thing. It's like just a guy. It's just a guy in a suit. And I know there's nothing you can do about it just being a guy in a suit, but it's just a guy in a suit.
You can do other things to make up for that and to make it more interesting and to make people not, to be able to put those things to the side because the rest of the show. This episode, I think, does pretty well at the things that we've been missing in the last few episodes.
Yeah.
But it still could have been more. And that's ultimately, I think, where we're coming to the end of this series. I think the culmination is definitely going to be that this show just didn't ever push itself to where it really wanted to go, or to where it really could have stayed very much within box. And then once like certain trends and things became popular in the last season and a half, we're seeing a lot of that replicated in these episodes. And we're watching this series almost 15 years after the fact. And so sure, we've been inundated with a million found footage movies, a million paranormal investigative TV shows, a million Walking Dead, military kind of focused government versus that, like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, it's like Resident Evil and 28 days later and 28 weeks later, even more so. We're getting a lot of that kind of vibe. And I think it's also the post everything with getting out of, I'm rambling. Take over.
No, well, I mean, you're going to say post 9/11?
Yeah.
Well, that's what it is. I mean, that is 100% the case. Like, this is still within the first decade of 9/11. The way that this is, the way that this is being shot. So I want to imagine I know why this show exists. I feel like this show because of Cloverfield.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Cloverfield comes out in January 18th of 2008. This show comes out in October of 2008. This show and the early versions of this show, the early seasons of this show are so Cloverfield-y, they're not even. And then the later seasons of this show are being inspired by the other movies of the day. Like, I would love to speak to the people who made this show, because I mean, absolutely. this is just us prognosticating. And I'm sure, you know what? I feel like we should reach out to them at this point.
We should.
Like, we've talked about the show for like
we may as well be like
30 episodes of our show has been for their show. But like, I have to have confirmation that that's the case, because there's no way that it's not. Cloverfield was a success. Yeah. Like, it was a massive fucking success. So why wouldn't you like say, okay, we have monsters. What kind of monsters do we have? Well, if we don't have to make our own monsters, what are free to use monsters? Okay, well, don't want to do Frankenstein and stuff. Right, exactly. Can't do Frankenstein.
Yeah, Universal won't let us have those.
Right. So cryptids, because nobody owns those, blah, 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 whatever. So there you go. Like, you've got it right then and there. So like, it makes sense. And like, again, the first couple seasons of that show, like, if you go back and watch it with like a more of an eye to Cloverfield, like, I bet it's kind of hews close to.
Yeah.
I bet it does.
And it has all of those elements. Yeah. And it just becomes more apparent in this.
Like it's strayed there, very far away.
It's been there. All the, everything is inspired by something else. Sure. But in this season, it seems just so heavy handed. It's like, this is the Paranormal Activity episode. Right. This is the Walking Dead episode. This is whatever. And it's just like, okay, that's fine. I see what you're doing.
There's no subtlety anymore.
But then I would rather just watch those other things if I'm going to watch that. Like,
right.
If I'm going to watch something like Paranormal Activity, I may as well just watch Paranormal Activity, because at least it was one of the kind of first like that, first ghost movies like that.
Gotcha. I agree. I mean, I'm with you 100%, especially when you're doing it so close and you're not doing enough with it.
Right.
You're essentially like on the nose, but you're just
walking the line. You're not pushing it. You're not making it different in any way. You're not unique in any way. You're just replicating it on a much smaller budget with a much smaller time frame.
Yeah.
Which makes it much less interesting.
Right. And as much as people want to talk about Cloverfield and what it kind of did for found footage, like it's not a cheap movie. You can't do some of the stuff you can't do cheap. And the things you can do.
You cannot.
Right. The things you can do cheaply are things that don't rely on effects. It's things that rely on like people. Like, oh, it's a person killing people. Yeah. Like that's.
It also doesn't help that most of the actors that are in each of these episodes are not good.
Well, I don't know where they're getting them from.
Good material. They're not given good material to work with. They're all very stiff. Like Chris said, when you're doing something that's found footage and you're with a group of people for however long you're with those people, they have to be characters beyond, cut and paste archetypes, essentially. They're like, you're the journalist, you're the scientist, you're this. Now that happens in so many found footage movies. Yes, obviously. And that's why they are one of the most like divisive types of horror movies out there, because people either love them or they fucking despise them.
Right. For good reason either way, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I like, the handful of them, the ones that did it right. I mean, Blair Witch is still scary, honestly.
Right.
It's still creepy.
Paranormal and the effects
Activity.
Are minimal. Even there, the effects are minimal.
Activity is ostensibly a pretty boring movie up until the last 10 minutes. Sure. Boring as in not a lot of action is happening, but they do a good job of, which is what you have to be doing when you're making stuff like this, where you can't rely on your big flashy effect to get the shock and awe out of people.
Well, and that's and that I think is where this show got itself into a pickle, because how do you do small effects with cryptid? Like it's a good idea, but like you need the budget for it.
Yeah.
Or you just never show it.
Yeah.
And that's like what
didn't work.
Right. And that's what the first season kind of did, and it kind of worked. Again,
Cloverfield
like kind of suffers when you see
it.
Well, and Cloverfield suffers when you see the monster. It's scary when you're seeing all the others. Like the monster's not scary. The monster is the least scary part of the movie.
No.
The scary part is like everything surrounding that and everything that like
what's happening, how the people are reacting to it.
Yeah, like that would
the random shit that's falling from the sky.
Right. Yeah, the destruction that the creature hath wrought. That's more terrifying than the fucking creature. So like the show kind of got that in the first season, but it's just lost. We're approaching the end of this show, so we're going to be talking about Wendigo next.
Oh, wow. I can't believe we haven't talked about that.
So I want to say right around the time when Maggie stepped in for you was when we did Skinwalker. So
okay. Well,
so
again, same family.
Yeah, you say Skinwalker, I say Wendigo, I
mean, the show could have also gotten more into like indigenous people lore.
Right.
Stuff like that.
Right, exactly.
Speaking of Wendigo and stuff like that, like it could have went there, but it didn't. I mean, maybe I'm kind of glad it didn't, because I feel like it might not have. That could have been potential for being handled poorly.
Yeah. Well,
we'll with this new episode, with this next episode, I guess.
The Skinwalker episode, I don't think was great.
Right. Yeah.
So until the Wendigo episode, Jess, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at WriterJessFired. You can also find me on TikTok by the same name. I'm working on getting a website updated, but until then, you can find me at those places. What about you, Chris?
As for me, you can find me at cstachiw.com, cstachiw.com. That's my link tree. Go there for all the things that I work on. As for this show, scarystorieswetell.com, Scary Stories WT on all social media, but just listen to the show. That's all you need to do. You don't need to go Twitter and all that shit. That's not what it's about. I don't do that. I don't like that.
We just want you to listen to us talk.
Yeah. Big thanks as always to Maggie the Odd and Dustin Rutledge for the album artwork for the show, and to Alex Malinaca Blondo for the music. And we will let our good friend, Mr. Tim White of Sighting, us out.
No mystery is closed to an open mind.